I want to welcome everybody to our first Coffee with the Mayor podcast. Today I have with us, I have Morgan Marler, who's our Water and Wastewater Superintendent, and our City Administrator, Matt Stiles. So welcome, Matt and Morgan, and
thank you.
Appreciate you guys being here, and we'll have a chat and hopefully help educate our customers and our constituents on what goes on in the world of water and wastewater relative to the city of Hillsborough. So again, we'll get started. Morgan, how long you been with the city?
23 years.
23 years. That's a long time.
It is.
Seen a few changes in those 23 years?
A lot, substantially.
Yeah. What's the biggest change you've dealt with in those 23 years?
One of the biggest positive changes, I think, is the change in the safety culture. That's really improved over the years. And then just the basic knowledge that an operator needs these days for water and wastewater treatment. I think in the 70s and 80s, we got by with hiring the best backhoe operator that we could to fix the water leaks. And over the years, the EPA and the KDHE regulations have increased and become so complicated, and the treatment's a lot more complicated. So I think that, the general knowledge that is required now for those jobs is a lot more technical than it was.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So you manage a staff of how many employees right now?
In the water department, we have 4 employees.
Okay. And our water treatment plant, is that staffed 24/7?
It's not staffed 24/7, but we operate 24/7 around the clock. We have a SCADA system that monitors all sorts of different types of parameters that we enter in daily. So we've got all sorts of alarms and online analyzers working for us during the night, keeping an eye on the quality of the water. And so if something exceeds any of those parameters, then it calls us, and we can either change something on our iPads and fix the problem, or then we come to the plant and fix the problem. But generally we're not staffed unless we're having some extreme issues. We're not staffed 24/7.
So what are some of the biggest issues? I know we recently, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit greater detail in a minute here, but as a council, we had to increase our water rates, and a lot of that was led by the state increasing the cost of the raw water to the city of Hillsborough. We had been operating under a 30-year contract, and
40 years. Yeah,
40-year contract, and at some point those 40 years do go by, and
Caught up with us, didn't they?
Yeah.
but what are some of the biggest challenges that you've had to deal with in terms of treatment of water to make sure that people in Hillsborough have good, safe, clean drinking water?
I think probably the biggest challenge over the years unanimously is the water quality changes that have occurred in the Marion Reservoir. Both the zebra mussels, we've got Asiatic clams, we have blue-green algae, iron and manganese. All of those issues have forced us to come up with creative solutions. And sometimes that solution making is messy. So that's been challenging. There aren't a lot of systems that have a lot of experience with it. So it's difficult to reach out into the field and ask for assistance from other operators. Sometimes we're making up our own solutions as we go. So I would say definitely water quality issues have been the most challenging.
Well, that all sounds really bad, but I think it's important to note that the challenges that you deal with, the result is clean and safe water, right?
Right. As I was walking out the plant today, I took a look at the screen, and right now the water that's going to our customers is 99.98% pure. And that's measured, that cleanliness is measured at numerous places throughout the treatment process, but as it's going out the door, it's not today, it's 99.98% pure. we've done a lot in our distribution system with replacing old cast iron lines. So as time goes on, that water that reaches the customers is of a lot better quality because it doesn't have to go through those old lines. So hopefully, they're happy with the product that they're getting at their tap.
Well, I certainly remember as a youngster growing up in Hillsborough, the quality of the water when we were using our well water was not good.
I've heard horror stories.
And, water softening systems were a must. Remember, used to drive to Lehigh with, 5-gallon containers to get water, from the water tower at Lehigh. That was a much better tasting water anyway. I'm not sure what the quality was any better per se, but it certainly tasted better. Yeah. So what are some of the things that affect the water taste? Once in a while we'll hear people complain about their water taste. So what are some of the things that impact that?
Well, the biggest issue that we deal with is a compound called geosmin. And it just takes a very, very small amount of geosmin to start causing some musty taste and odors. And some people can pick up those very, very small amounts. I was always thankful for Dolores Dalkey because she lived about a block away from the plant and she had the sharpest nose for that. So she would always let me know when she started smelling that we could make some adjustments at the plant. But the geosmin is related to different algae and blue-green algae species in the reservoir. And as those algae cells start breaking down after they die, that geosmin is released into the water column. And so it's really difficult for us to detect that in the plant. We've got some mechanisms that we use that aren't very scientific, but we do use powdered activated carbon to counteract that geosmin. And we actually developed our own powdered activated carbon product with the main supplier who supplies that for us. And we order our powdered activated carbon by the semi-load to help reduce the cost. But they also blend this carbon product specifically for us. And those carbon particles have the right micron size in the particles to absorb our geosmin and also absorb our algal toxins that are specific to our reservoir. So over the long haul, that has saved us money as a municipality by blending that product specific for our contaminants and then also purchasing it, by the semi-load. And that's just a little bit of science that went into it. It wasn't too difficult to do that. But that powdered activated carbon, which you can see on my hands today, that powdered activated carbon, it probably does the bulk of our treatment for us in the plant.
So you mentioned, helping keep the cost down, and obviously, again, we talked about City Council took action to raise our water rates to make adjustments for the increased cost of raw water, but there are also other costs that go into these treatments that Morgan's mentioned. Matt, can you speak a little bit about what goes into the costs of treating our water?
Sure. So, Morgan talked about the blue-green algae and kind of how when that breaks down, it creates different things for us. So iron and manganese is one of those byproducts too, organic iron and manganese. And so one of the things that has to go into treating that is more chemical, essentially. And, she talked about activated carbon. We also use chlorine as an oxidizer. And so when that stuff kind of comes into the plant, you hit it with the chlorine to start to kill it, and it basically turns it black. It gets really kind of things you wouldn't necessarily want. And so we got to put more chemical into it, which of course requires more energy and more people, more time spent doing all that stuff. And so, we've had situations, at least last year anyway, we had a situation where our blue-green algae, iron and manganese problem was, months long versus it normally it's, a couple weeks. And so for whatever reason, whatever's going on in the water column at the reservoir, we're seeing more and more. And so one of the things we had to do is adjust the water rate in order to compensate for that. And unfortunately, when we're talking about when those are the high times, it's our highest usage times too. So that's during the summertime. We got, 4 weeks or 12 weeks, 4 months, 3 or 4 months there where it is at its worst, and we're having to spend sometimes almost twice as much on chemicals and people and mechanics and everything to move that forward and treat it so that it's 99.98% pure when it comes to your tap.
Right.
Sometimes that's just kind of how it's been the last few weeks, or last year, and we don't see any indication it's going to change. We've had folks out from the Environmental Finance Center, Wichita State, K-State's been out, looked at it. They've got research teams with the EPA, or associated with the EPA, I guess is the way to say it, who've looked at the water in the reservoir, but we can't quite figure out what exactly is going on there. And one of the other issues is who exactly is responsible for the quality in the reservoir, and no one seems to want to take responsibility for it. So that was a big piece of the 83 cents out of the water rate increases, just to treat those things that come in from the blue-green algae, the iron and manganese, all those things. The other part, you mentioned the water contract. We had a 4-year water contract with the state of Kansas Water Office, and we've lived a pretty good life for the 4 years since the early 80s to pay like 15 cents a 1,000 gallons for it. And as that contract expired, we have to renegotiate that with them. And of course, now it's at market rate, which is close to 45 cents. So, 30 cents of the rate increase that we did, the council took action on, is just to pay for the raw water. Now that cost has increased. So that's kind of how that is. And that's one of the things that goes into how we treat that water, to make sure that when you turn on the tap, it's as clean as possible, and it runs, it flows. So,
it's interesting. You and I attended the League of Kansas Municipalities annual conference this year in Topeka, and we heard several cities talk about water scarcity. And these are primarily cities out in western Kansas.
right.
I think Hayes being one, and Garden City being another one. But that's not something we have to deal with, or we have to be concerned about at the moment, which, again, I think it goes to a lot of times we just take things for granted. I mean, we take, we turn on the tap and we expect clean water to come out, and there are some places in Kansas where they are limited in the number of people they can accommodate because of the amount of water available.
You're right. Yep.
And so it's not something, we need to, I think, going forward, and we talked a little bit about it in council when we talked about the rates, but I think it's something we got to keep our eyes on, maybe not right at the forefront, but certainly in the back of our minds. We have to keep our minds on water as a source, as something that may or may not be a concern in the future.
That's true. We're blessed to have Marion Reservoir, and it actually, in the reservoir systems in Kansas, is one of the least pledged out. And so we've got our water contracts 300 million gallons a year. We can take up to 300 million gallons. And so we don't ever come close to that, not even most of the time, about half of that. So we're pretty thankful. We're lucky in that regard, because people out in western Kansas, it's not the case. They're figuring out how to pipe water in from
what was it,
60 miles south.
60 miles away. They were talking about running water into the city of Hayes. So that was an eye opener for me. I hadn't realized that they were dealing with that. I had been aware that the Ogallala Aquifer has been drawn down, with agricultural irrigation, but didn't realize how much that was impacting the cities out there.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, but we're in good shape here. So hopefully, as long as we keep things moving in the right direction, we'll have plenty of water.
So relative to our capacity. So we talked about, we have a contract where we can use up to 300 million gallons a year if we need it. And we're operating at approximately half or somewhat less than half of that. So treatment capacity wise, Morgan, where are we at in our ability to treat water from a capacity standpoint? Where are you operating? Are you operating at 25%, 30%, 50%?
I would say about 25%. When we did the plant upgrades in 2006, the Hillsborough City Council was looking to the future of, I guess, water use and water treatment. And they upsized everything when we did the upgrades. They upsized everything and doubled the capacity of the plant. Looking to the future and realizing that probably well water was going to be either scarce or contaminated, and we might be able to pick up some other smaller communities in our county and help provide water for them. So with that upgrade package, we basically doubled our capacity to 3 million gallons a day.
And speaking of other communities, who do we do sell treated water to other communities, right?
Yes, Peabody, the city of Peabody. And we have an emergency connection on the highway with the rural water district number 4, and we can pump water to them in an emergency situation and provide water to their customers, and they can do that for us as well.
Well, that sounds smart.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of foresight on my predecessors, to think ahead, which I'm very happy that they did that.
Yeah, I am too.
But it's important to note that the plant is set up in such a way that we have the capacity to do that. It's not active right now. So it's not like we pay a ton of money to keep that capacity there. It's just, we have to be able to make some changes, and we could turn it up fairly quickly. If we had to, but
correct.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wise decision. Sometimes overbuilding is good, especially when you don't know what's going to happen in the future.
So that we also recently completed some major upgrades to our water distribution system in town.
Yes.
Water lines. I know that in Wilson Street in particular, I think that was that before we replaced that line, it was pretty much all patches.
Yes, I have been present on 83 water line repairs on that stretch of Wilson, 3 blocks of Wilson in the 23 years. Yeah, we did. Over the last 23 years, we've replaced about 70% of our distribution system. Whether we got grants or financing and had contractors do it, or we did the projects in-house. We've done some small, several block projects in-house with assistance of our engineers. And then we also went through and changed out all of our meters in town. They were getting old and inaccurate, and so we changed those out to more modern metering type that can grab hold of the small uses of water and meter those. And then also it's a radio read system, so once a month we set our little handheld device in the trash truck, and we let him do his route for the day, and he picks up the meter readings. And there are always a handful that we have to go and pick up ourselves, but for the most part, that system's working really well for us.
So that means you don't have people out reading meters anymore?
Right. Yes.
So how many hours of labor has that saved?
It would take 3 of us a good week to do that.
Yeah, you used to have to write it all down by hand, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's 120
man hours.
man-hours a month.
Yeah.
That's significant.
Right. And I'm not quite sure what kind of time savings it is here in the office for the billing clerk. I don't know how that has changed for her with that upgrade. I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure it has to have, made that way more efficient for her as well.
It just gets imported now. And so,
yeah.
And we're doing the same thing with the electrical meters now too. And now we're kind of in the process of that. So that'll save a ton of time on that side of the house too.
That's The term for that is AMR.
AMR, automated meter reading, yeah.
And that's something that, that we have embraced on anything that we're in the utility side of our business, that we meter to customers, which is good. Saves labor, more accurate.
Safer, way safer.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is safer.
Yeah.
I'm thankful for that whole install.
Yeah, that was a great project. And you know, the nice thing about those projects is they came in on time and under
Mhm.
budget. And so
They did.
that's what you like about doing a project, especially something as significant as that
Right.
was.
Right. How often do they come
Right.
in on time and
Right.
under budget?
So that was good. So we talked about water quite a bit. I know that you, in the last year, have picked up the wastewater side of the business, and I understand that that's something that you've been certified for.
I
And
have
so,
been. I think it was 2002 or 2003, I became certified. And at the time, we were using the old mechanical treatment plant. So learning the ins and outs of the lagoon system has been a new experience.
Mhm.
We are doing some upgrades there as well. To the wastewater lagoons. We're adding some baffles in our first cell of the lagoon, and also some aerators that will help us with some of some odors that we have out of that lagoon, and hopefully treat that first cell a little bit better, so that there's a better biological reaction in that cell.
I'll tell you that that was one of the first calls I got after being elected mayor, was somebody calling me and alerting me to the odor
Yeah.
coming off of our lagoons. And so I get it.
Twice a year. And we,
Yeah.
it's just like a pond, when it turns over,
Right.
there's a smell, yeah.
So I think those aerators will be installed in the next couple of weeks, and I'm not quite sure how long it will take for the biological process to improve, but you know, hopefully within the next 30 to 60 days, I would hope to see some better treatment coming out of those.
I know in the past, we had used some different chemical, again, to address some of those odors prior to these upgrades being installed. Will we still need to do that, or will this upgrade address that?
I don't know. I think we'll just have to wait and see. You know, we do have some lift stations where we have some odor problems that we add chemicals to help with that treatment. And maybe once we get everything situated, maybe we can do away with some of those chemicals and that extra treatment. That's the hope anyway.
Mhm.
But I think we just have to have it in place for a little while and be able to play around with those aerators and experiment with them and see what the best operating scenario is for us.
So future state, what do you, when you look out into the future, what do you see?
What am I
What's your
scared?
crystal
What am I
ball?
scared of?
Well, I don't know about scared of, but well, it could be, I guess. But what's your crystal ball look like?
Oh, well, my crystal ball looks like everything's going to be peachy keen. The water treatment plant's going to run very well. The wastewater treatment plant, the wastewater system will run very well with the new improvements. You know, we've made some changes with our new hires and doing a lot of cross training with our new hires.
Mhm.
And we do have a handful of younger, newer people on staff that are, you know, learning as they go. So in the next year to 2 years, those people will be coming up to speed with their knowledge and their training and their education. And that's a really good investment for the city of Hillsborough.
Mhm.
So I think the future looks great for us.
Very good. So from an administrator's standpoint, where does you have to manage all the operations of the city, Matt, but where does water and wastewater kind of sit in terms of how much of your time gets taken up, you know, with in this area?
Sure.
Sometimes it's a lot.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the day. I tell you what, it's a lot more time when it doesn't work. And so we have to put a lot of forethought and effort into making sure things continue to operate. It's one of those things you mentioned, like people take for granted.
Right.
You know, when you turn your tap on in the morning, if it works, you don't think twice about it. But when it doesn't, we certainly hear about it. So, you know, we want to be sure that we're being proactive and making sure we're doing maintenance and that we've got good people. And I think we've got a good crew right now. That there's a little bit less experience, but that's okay because we've got the opportunity now to train people and really make a difference there. And you know, I think as we continue to invest and look at the future, we think about, you know, maintaining the system, making sure everything is good, and being able to adapt to things that come along as they do. I know we talk, Morgan and I talk pretty frequently, if not every day, pretty close.
Yeah.
So it can take up quite a bit of time between that and the other utilities, electricity, that one, when it goes down, people let you know. And then streets and things like that. So, you know, a lot of times the utilities take up a good chunk of time, but you know, it's one of those things, it's our infrastructure, it's our bread and butter. So
Sure.
we got to make sure it all works, and more than happy to take that investment, making sure everything continues to move forward. And it's a good day when we don't get a lot of phone calls. That means hopefully we're doing things pretty good. But that's where that effort kind of pays off. And you know, it's good for the citizens. I think that's us being good stewards of the money too. So we try to be as best we can.
Sure. And you know, to that point, I think it would be well to say that some of the rate goes into keeping our fund balance.
True.
You know, all of our utilities have a fund that they operate from. And one of the requirements that we put in place as a city governance is we have a fund balance target for number of days that the utility is covered in case there was some kind of problem.
Yeah.
And also, you know, looking towards future investment in the utilities as well.
Yeah. There's always something that's going to need to be replaced. And I think the mindset, at least in working with the council and looking at the community, has been to be more proactive about that rather than reactive, because things break. I mean, it happens. We talked about variable frequency drives the other day. We know those things have to be fixed. And so when they break, we fix them. We also, we try to keep parts on stock so that, you know, if something happens, we can fix it. And, having a good fund balance is just like operating your own home, right? I mean, if your car breaks, you need to be able to fix that so you can keep going to work or keep taking the kids to school or whatever your obligations are. So, you know, if you think of it in those terms, that's the way to really conceive of it, that, you know, this is the money that we use in case something really happens. A tornado comes through town. Hopefully it never happens, right? But if something does happen, we at least have operational money to where we can continue providing service as best we can. So that's the way I think about it. I think that's the way the council's thought about it. And it's just good, sound financial management. You want to run it with enough money to cover your bases and be prepped for something in the future.
Yeah.
So.
And I have to say, from you know, not from the administrative side, but from the operations side, that you know, keeping those extra parts on hand and having good maintenance plans and standard operating procedures and all of those things are important for us in our department to maintain well, so that we can keep the costs down. Because when we have to fix something in an emergency, that's more expensive. Or, you know, if we don't have the parts on hand and we have to order them and they have to be here overnight, it's more expensive. So, you know, from the operations standpoint, we always have an eye on the bottom line and do what we can, you know, in the field to keep those costs down for the customers.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. And especially now with the supply chain under tremendous strain across the board.
That's been
You know,
difficult.
it's something that I deal with in the business that I'm in every day. And I know you guys do too. And I appreciate it when you brought forward to the council, you know, opportunities to keep ahead of the supply chain and buy in bulk so that we can save money and have it available when we need it. So I appreciate that. And, you know, the other part that kind of goes unnoticed a lot is, and hopefully it's less so now that we've gone through these major distribution upgrades, is, nobody sees when you're out there and it's 10 below zero and you're up to your waist in a hole trying to patch a water line. That's something, again, that we take for granted, but since certainly since becoming mayor, I recognize those challenges, and very, very appreciative of you and your team
Thank you.
for the job that you do to make sure that Hillsborough has the best quality of water around, the most reliable distribution system around, and operating at a very cost-effective level. So,
Thank you.
Morgan, I
that.
appreciate it. I appreciate you coming in and
Well,
having coffee with the mayor today.
And I have to say that I'm also appreciative of you and the mayor who sat in your spot before you, and all of the councils I've worked with, because without them, and the decisions that you guys make when you sit around this table, we couldn't do what we do and do it efficiently. So
It's a team effort, right?
yep, it is.
Right.
For sure.
Well, listen, thanks again, Morgan. I'll let you get back out there and then
Anytime.
keep that water flowing.
Okay. Don't put any pressure on me.
That's no pressure. No pressure, just other than standard operating pressure.
Right. Just 55 pounds of pressure.
That's it.
Pounds.
That wasn't too painful.